Welcome to EduPen channel. So in this video, basically what we are going to learn is how to solve quadratic equations by completing a square. So there are three ways in which we can actually solve quadratic equations. The first one is a method of factorization, which we have already done. So if you want to look at that video, you can click on the upper right corner. That's where it will appear. And then secondly, it's a method in which we complete a square. So by completing a square, which is what we are about to do in this video. And then lastly, it's a method by which we use a quadratic formula, which we'll do in the next video. So before you continue, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you do not miss any content from EduPen channel. So without any waste of time, let's dive into completing a square in order to solve quadratic equations. So these are the following steps that you need to follow in order for you to complete a square. So the first thing that you need to do to your equation is to write it in a standard form. If you don't know how to write equations in standard form, we have already done this in the previous videos as well. So basically what you need to do, for example, if you have 2x squared plus 2x, which is equals to 10, this equation is actually not in standard form. So to write it in standard form, you're going to say that it is 2x squared plus 2x minus 10, which is equals to 0. Then your equation will be in standard form. The second step that you need to do is to make the coefficient of x squared term equal to 1. So if, for example, you have 2x squared plus 2x minus 10, which is equals to 0. So the second step that you will need to do after writing your equation in standard form is making sure that the coefficient of x squared, which is this number in front of x squared, it's 1. So you can do that by dividing the whole equation by the coefficient of x squared. So in this case, the coefficient of x squared is actually 2. So it means that you're going to divide the whole equation by 2. And if we divide the whole equation by 2, we will have x squared plus x minus 5, which is equals to 0. So we have divided this by 2 and divided this by 2 and divided this by 2 and also divided this by 2, because what you do on the left hand side, you also do on the right hand side as well. And then we move to the third step. So the third step, basically what you need to do is to take half the coefficient of the x term. So for example, if we have x squared plus x plus 1, so basically you have to take the coefficient of x and do what with it, and take half of it. So in this case, the half of the coefficient of x is actually 0.5. So you're going to take 0.5 and then square it, and then square it, and then after squaring it, you then add it and subtract it from your original equation. So we are going to have minus 0.5 squared plus 0.5 squared, just so that our equation stays the same, because 0.5 minus 0.5, they both take each other out and you are left with your original equation. So the fourth step is actually writing the left hand side as a difference of two squares, and now the fifth step is actually factorizing the equation in terms of difference of two squares and actually solving for x. So you will see what these steps entail in the example that I'm about to make. So consider the equation x squared minus 2x minus 1, which is equals to 0. So in order to solve this equation by factorization method, you actually have to find factors that when you multiply them they give you -1, and when you add them they give you -2. So let's see if it's possible to solve this equation by method of factorization. So the factors that we have for -1, it's -1 multiplied by 1, which is equals to -1. And if we add the same factors, these are the only factors that are possible for you to get -1. And then if you add -1 plus 1, you get 0. So it means that these factors are impossible to use because they do not give us -2 when we add them. So even if your grandmother is from Limpopo and you really have that faith in her, I'm sorry to tell you that she will not help you with this one. So what is the solution for this kind of problem? So a simple example is x minus 1 squared, which is a perfect square, and if you expand it, you have x squared minus 2x plus 1. With this one you have factors, because the factors for this one, you're going to have -1 multiplied by -1, it will give you +1, which is this one. And if you say -1 plus -1, you get -2, which is this middle term. Right. So in order to solve the equation x squared minus 2x minus 1, the only way to solve it is by completing a square or by using the quadratic formula, which we haven't learned about yet, but we will learn about it in the next video. So following the steps of completing a square, so the first thing that we should do is to write our equation in standard form, which is already in standard form. And then secondly, we must make sure that the coefficient of x squared is actually 1, and it is 1 indeed here. So that's alright. And then we also have to take the middle term and actually find half of it, and half of it in this case it's 1. So if half of it is 1, basically what we're going to do is say 1 squared, which is equals to 1. We then square it and then it's equals to 1. So after finding half of the middle number and then squaring it, basically what you need to do is to take the result after squaring it, the number that you get after squaring it, and add it as well as subtract it from the equation. So we are going to have x squared minus 2x minus 1 plus 1 minus 1. The reason why we say plus 1 minus 1, it's so that we keep our equation as it is. So this -1, it's going to cancel this and we will be left with our original equation if we want to go back. But we are just using this plus 1 minus 1 in order to be able to find the factors that we need in order to solve this equation. So you then proceed further. So you then play around with your numbers. You will have x squared minus 2x, and then you take this +1 and put it here, and then this -1 plus this -1, they will give you a -2, which is equals to 0. And then after doing this, you then take -2 to the other side of the equation, so it's going to be +2, and then you are left with what? With x squared minus 2x plus 1. And then you look for factors of this terms which are on the left. So you're going to have your x and your x. And if you take a look at this, what we have on the left hand side, you can actually see that it's the same as the result of the perfect square that we had above. So we are going to have x minus 1 and x minus 1. So you have to find the factors for this part of the equation. So the factors that when we multiply them, they give us -1. It's going to be -1 multiplied by -1, which is equals to 1. And then if you add -1 plus -1, you actually get a -2, which is what we got there in the middle. And then we factorize, and then that is equals to 2. And then this 2 brackets, you can write it into one bracket and say it's x minus 1 all squared, which is equals to 2. And then you have to find the value of x. So what you do is you can find the root of x minus 1 squared and the root plus or minus root of 2. So you will have x minus 1, which is equals to plus or minus the root of 2. And then what you do is you then take the -1 to the other side, and then you have x, which is equals to 1 plus or minus the root of 2. Then after finding the value of x, you just have to say, therefore, write the final solution and say, therefore, x is equals to 1 plus the root of 2, or x is equals to 1 minus the root of 2. And then you will be done.